What's up, boys? So a lot of people actually seem to be pretty interested in Barbara as a DPS for whatever reason. And I think that's all cool and fine and dandy, but let me just say this first. It's way too awkward to recommend her as a DPS. Only way that I could see this working for you is if somehow you have her built as like a hybrid DPS, but also like a healer, where she just pops in and does some big vaporize damage to finish something off or to basically start a reaction chain or something like that. With that being said, though, she can actually hit some stupid numbers that you wouldn't expect Barbara to ever be able to hit, and it is quite fun to do like 20k with Barbara. Like, who does that? I do enjoy seeing the really high numbers, but the downtime in between your main like damage dealing is pretty hard to deal with. But nonetheless, let's actually go over a couple of the characters and talk about what we did. Since Barbara is our main DPS, she is the main character that we kind of need to go over here. There's a couple of different ways that you could build her. I saw a lot of people using her with the Solar Pearl for the extra crit rate and stuff like that. I did go with the Widsith. I did do a little bit of tinkering with the Solar Pearl just because it does have crit rate instead of crit damage. But I ultimately decided to go with the Widsith, even if it's a little bit more RNG heavy based on which stat you end up getting. But the nice thing here is that all three stats that you end up getting are really, really nice for Barbara in terms of being a DPS. So an attack increase is great because Barbara, funny enough, has the lowest base attack in the entire game as of 1.3. Her elemental damage being increased is great, and her elemental mastery being increased is just going to add to the fuel that we do whenever we hit our vaporize. So you could go with either Widsith or Solar Pearl, either one, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. But personally, I was shooting for a higher crit damage number than a higher crit rate. I didn't really mind if we didn't crit every single hit, but I kind of wanted to just see some big numbers. So as far as her artifacts go, there are many, many ways that you can do this. I personally chose to go with Gladiator's Finale for some extra attacks, simply because Barbara's attack is quite low to begin with. Then I actually chose a two-piece of Wanderer's Troop just to get some extra elemental mastery out of her and just kind of help push some more vaporize, elemental mastery bonus, stuff like that. And I actually did choose a Hydro damage cup. You could choose elemental mastery, but I definitely think that Hydro is going to pay off a lot more. And pretty much like the main thing that Barbara wants to do is use her charged attack. So her charged attack is literally just huge. 233% is pretty nutty. So you want to be able to use her charged attack as much as possible. The problem with that is that her freaking charged attack costs 50 stamina, which it just seems like all of the Catalyst users have a higher charged attack stamina cost, which is kind of what I was talking about with like the damage period for her. You can hit some really high numbers with her charged attack, but then you kind of get into the situation where you're out of stamina and you can't really do anything. And then the issue is if you're running her for vaporize, then you kind of are always going to be taking away the aura gauge off of the enemy, because vaporize is going to be strong when Hydro is applied on top of Pyro. You end up not having like any aura left over, so it's not like you can do, you know, your E and then you can do your normal attack and then finish on a charge attack. It consumes so much of the aura that you're gonna have some downtime, which is really what sucks about this. But anyways, this is pretty much what we ended up with. Crit rate, crit damage we already talked about earlier, and then Hydra damage bonus at 46. Then we actually moved on to a duo that is probably one of the cheapest duos that you can get just to do like big numbers. Sucrose and Bennett. Sucrose is very interesting because she is able to increase the elemental mastery of your team, which is really nice. So it ends up giving you a higher elemental mastery bonus, so you can do more vaporize damage and stuff like that. But also, whenever she has a 4-piece of Viridescent, she lowers the elemental resistance of a element infused with Swirl by 40% for 10 seconds. So you basically apply an aura, swirl, lower their resistance, apply some type of pyro. Typically your first application will be with Bennett's ult, and then you can just switch back to Barbara and do some vaporize. Sucrose is actually super important for hitting big numbers, but she's kind of cheap. Just to let you know, it's kind of like a cop out to use Sucrose in a lot of these like showcases, but it's fun. Sucrose is basically built with sacrificial fragments. Not like, honestly, the only thing that Sucrose really needs is the 4-piece of Viridescent, and she needs her talents unlocked. After that, You literally just build her to have as much elemental mastery as possible. You can see here that total she ends up having 440, which is pretty freaking gnarly. So she has a ton of extra elemental mastery to give to the other characters on your team, and that's really all you want her for. Bennett, of course, is going to be our like huge attack buffer. I think for most of the video, he actually has a Favonius sword on him. Simply for the crit rate chance to increase our ability to get extra energy. I just want him to be able to fire off his bursts as often as possible. He is working with a full 4-piece of Noblesse because Noblesse is good. Extra elemental burst damage is not really what we're worried about, but the extra attack for 12 seconds is what we really want. And then after that, he literally is just built to buff the team. So as much attack that you can have on him. HP is not like my priority with him on this kind of team, but because his stuff does scale off of base attack, for the attack bonus ratio here, you basically just want to have as much attack as you can with his level and whatever sword you end up putting on him. Then lastly, we need to talk about Xiangling. In my opinion, Xiangling is probably the best pyro support for this team to work. Now, I don't have Klee, so I can't really speak a ton on how she would apply a lot of like pyro in this kind of team, but honestly, I feel like if you had Klee, you would build Klee as the main DPS and use Barbara as that quick swap in to do the vaporize damage kind of thing like we were talking about earlier. That would be like the ideal situation if I had Klee, but since I don't, I can't really speak a whole lot on her. But Xiangling, out of all of the other pyro characters in the game, definitely was the all-star in terms of applying pyro to the enemy. So essentially what this team lacks, like I talked about earlier, is a consistent source of pyro. Xiangling made that a lot easier. Being able to drop Gooba down and just have him constantly apply pyro was great. Being able to throw Pyronado out and have it constantly apply pyro while you're sitting on Barbara and just doing vaporize damage as much as possible is freaking awesome. That is probably like the best thing about Xiangling in this team. But because of the way that the auras are going to work out, sometimes you will end up doing vaporize with Xiangling. So elemental mastery isn't a huge problem on her. I personally just had Favonius Lance so that she could have as much energy recharge as possible. And then she's basically built with just some random stuff that honestly, I probably could have made her a lot better than she currently is. But this is just what I had on her. That's pretty much Xiangling's purpose. I mean, you can kind of see how she's built here. She's not super important in terms of like her stats and stuff. Her energy recharge was the most important thing to me because I wanted to be able to fire off Pyronado while Gooba was on cooldown, or you know, any kind of situation where I just needed more pyro. That was pretty much the main goal with her. All in all, I think that this team works kind of sloppy. It feels like the team is too much work to get it to work, which is really interesting for a team setup because I feel like I had to go through so many hoops just to get like that consistent DPS. There were a couple of clips which you probably saw earlier in like the intro showcase that it looked like I was hitting, you know, 20k 18k like pretty consistently, but those were just random crits that actually worked out in my favor. It wasn't consistent enough for me to be able to recommend anyone really like go all in on this type of team. But if you are someone that really enjoys Barbara and really likes to see like some pretty dumb numbers that you wouldn't expect Barbara to be able to hit, I mean, she's fully capable. If I was recommending this team to anyone, like what would I like actually set it up as now? I think I would probably do Xiangling as the main DPS. Have her like set up as your main damage dealer, whether it's physical damage or however you want to like set her up. And then have Barbara be the switch in for the vaporize damage whenever you get all of your stuff set up. I think that would probably be the better situation, because even then you could set up Sucrose to still give elemental mastery to everyone. You could have Bennett still buff attacks, and Xiangling would do a lot of damage more consistently, but she wouldn't be able to hit like a stupid high reaction number like Barbara would, so you could just in turn just use Barbara to like do a super high like 20k vaporize to get some combo started or to finish off an enemy really quickly. Like, I think that's the way I would do it. And I also went and like tried to think about like pyro application outside of Xiangling. Diluc really like, he would be a good replacement for Xiangling if you were going to do the team setup where Barbara was the vaporizer and that's it. Like if Diluc was your main DPS, I think you could easily replace Xiangling. Xinyan could be okay because if you hit her shield and it has the level 2 status or whatever it is, yeah, the level 2 hitting 3 or more opponents, Rave, which allows things to take pyro damage. That's really good if you were to have that. Xiangling I felt was just more beneficial with her ult, and this was a little bit more situational because Gooba didn't really have to have like that specific situation happen. Amber could, I mean, if you already have Amber built for your main DPS, good luck. I guess she could be like your main DPS and replace Xiangling in that like switch in kind of team, but I didn't really feel like I had a consistent like way to apply pyro outside of Xiangling. And then like you could really use any Animo character as long as Viridescent is what's on there. Just Sucrose just makes a ton more sense for the Elemental Mastery buffs and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Barbara was actually really fun to build as a DPS just because I am that type of person that likes to see high numbers. But I'm immediately going to break this team down and give artifacts back to who they need to go on because this is not something that I plan on keeping. So yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and leave you off with a little bit more gameplay and a little bit of music so you guys can kind of see a little bit more Barbara in action. But anyways, thank you guys. See ya.